Well, thank you, Liam Burns, for joining us. This is Data Nerds in the OR podcast. We're live at LSI in Dana Point, California. We've had 2 great days. This is the 3rd day. And thank you for joining us on the podcast. Liam is CEO of Qaelon Medical. Qaelon Medical has become a partner with Care Syntax in our clinical data as a service. So Liam, if you don't mind, just introduce yourself and tell us about your company.
Sure, thank you. So I've been with Qaelon about a year, and I signed up to join the company because of the mission. The mission is really starting in GI surgery and surgical leaks. And so I really want to make sure that people know that we're on a mission to change the trajectory of surgical leaks. It's clinically devastating to the patient, to the healthcare system, and certainly to the entire ecosystem of medicine. But I really want to make it more personal. I chose to be in healthcare 30 years ago, and each company that I've chosen to work with has been because it's something personal to me. And so if you ask me why I'm doing Qaelon, there's this kid named Qaelon who is a volleyball coach. He's influencing young high school athletes' lives, and he has Crohn's disease. And unfortunately, he got that when he was a young teenager. It certainly changed the trajectory of his health. But I know it's well controlled with infusion therapy. So gratitude to all of the biotech and drug companies that have designed those therapies. But I know that at some point in time, he may end up having to have surgery. And I hope it's never, because I think we're getting better and better at treating these types of complicated diseases. But I know that if he has surgery, and he has a colorectal surgery, that if he gets an early leak, there's an 18% chance of him dying. This is not about a patient who I don't know. It's not about a hospital. It's not about a hospital or a healthcare system that I don't know. This is about my son. And so I know that what we're doing can minimize those impacts. And hopefully, if he ever gets to that point, we've solved arguably one of the most complex and complicated surgical complications in the world, which is a surgical leak. And so a long story, but that's part of the mission. I'm lucky to bring 30 years experience to this journey. I've worked with countless breakthrough technologies. I've been in thousands of surgical procedures in many, many different hospitals around the world. And I think I bring a perspective to move fast, to take advantage of all the tools that are out there to propel new technology forward. And now we're in a very exciting time where it's not just about your medical device. We're not med tech anymore. We're tech med. And when you do tech med, data is the most powerful tool to advance outcomes and improve outcomes very, very rapidly. So we're at this place where we can make great new technology and we can add data to it, and it can have a larger impact on the healthcare system, on the patients, on the surgeons, and certainly reduce costs. That's what is so exciting about the revolution that we're going through right now.
Yeah, and we've had these conversations before, and the passion and the commitment based on your personal experience and your son's experience, I think we share that too. My youngest son has some disabilities, and I know if we don't improve our healthcare system, we're all suffering, and the people we love and care about are suffering in a system that's not designed for human beings, really. Yeah. And that's a huge challenge. I have a special experience with this problem because for 30 years I was an academic surgeon, general surgeon. I did bariatric surgery, I did colorectal surgery, I did low anterior anastomosis of the left colon, and I can tell you, every single time I did an anastomosis, I'd pour saline in to hold that fragile anastomosis down with a suction or a grasper, and then blow air in and look for bubbles. How archaic is that?
It's amazing that in the time of robotic surgery, of gene therapy, of cameras that in real time can detect cancer or abnormal tissue. We're still doing the bicycle tire test, the bike tire test. And I think it's even more fascinating. The first reference to the air bubble test in the medical literature was 1910. So we are doing something from 1910. We're better than that. And I think that's why we're excited at Qaelon, because we are the first and only quantifiable real-time detector of a leak. And most of these leaks, they do the air bubble test because you can't see them. And in our preclinical research, we've done over 1,200 tests. We are finding 1 millimeter hole leaks in under 30 seconds. That means that the surgeon can act before the patient even leaves the OR. Not 3 or 4 days later where you're waiting to see, hey, let's hope we don't have a leak here. Yeah. We'll know, and the surgeon can treat it. Surgeons are doing everything they can, but I love working with Care Syntax because we're now bringing that intelligence, and my definition of real world is in real life right now. Yeah. And that's, I think, where the partnership with Care Syntax to take the test data and bring it into an intelligent platform where we can guide surgical decision-making at the moment of care. That's the promise of AI and data and, frankly, the Care Syntax platform.
Yeah, and I appreciate your technology. I would have slept better some of those nights after those difficult anastomoses. So let's talk about the data. Let's talk about our partnership together, Care Syntax and Qaelon Medical. You know, you're not on the market yet. We're working with our module go-to-market strategy where we're trying to prepare you and your company with real-world data that sets you up so when you do get on the market, you have a very deep knowledge of the data and what the data shows in terms of where your value is, where your value may not be, and how to commercialize much quicker. So talk about that kind of strategy that we're working on together and the value of a data strategy for a company, even pre-market.
Yeah, I think we're in an era where the data strategy has to be embedded in your corporate strategy right from the start. You have to think about that. Let's talk about product design for a second. So we have an integrated leak detection and a state-of-the-art constant flow insufflator. If we just focused on that product until we got to market, what we would miss is all the design engineering that has to be put in the box or planned. It doesn't necessarily have to be executed, but it has to be planned at the very early stage of product development. We need to build into our insufflator a way to extract data, to make sure it drops into the Care Syntax system flawlessly through the cloud or whatever connection. That's got to be built into the PCB board. So you've got to have space for that. You've got to have a mechanism for transmission, things like that. That's one of the examples where it drives the product strategy. The other part is that there is no benchmark on leak detection. If you ask 10 surgeons, they will give you a range from, depending on where it is clinically, 1 to 2% leaks to 19 or 20%. And no one really agrees on the definition of a leak. They're still working on that, and there's a great task force that's working on defining that more clearly so that we can evaluate leaks more accurately. But we don't even know how to define them, much less the rates being all over the map. And I often get the question about, well, what do you think about how you can impact early leaks versus late leaks? And my very honest answer is, not only do I don't know, the surgical community doesn't know. Right. Because we're doing a visual analog test in the air bubble test. Yeah. It's not reliable. And you're trying to detect something that you cannot see. Yeah. So when you can bring quantifiable data, the first thing we're going to do, and this is part of our partnership, let's establish what the baseline is. Right. We know that we can bring new transparency to leaks, and that should improve outcomes. I'm very, very confident if we can help you as a surgeon find them, you can treat them and fix them before the patient leaves the OR. But we don't even have a baseline yet. And so the first part of our project is to say, here's the baseline of leaks. And this is independent data. You know, one of the things that resonates in my mind is you've said over and over again, we're vendor neutral, we're hospital neutral, we're surgeon neutral, what that really means is you're patient-centric.
Exactly.
We're going to do what is best for the patient, and everyone else will be better off. If we find leaks, we avoid cost. We avoid horrible, life-changing outcomes for patients, and the surgeons are going to sleep better at night.
Right.
They are.
Right.
And frankly, the parents of kids that have surgery, God forbid, I hope that doesn't happen, but we're going to sleep better. And so I think that's the other part of this transparency, where so much of this we don't know. And so the benchmark is first, and then we'll go into, top centers, the most reputable surgeons, the most reputable hospitals, and we will prove using your platform that our product works. So first step, excellent efficacy and accuracy. But the best part about the real world evidence data is that it keeps going. It never stops harvesting. It is literally like the data river that so many people are referring to. That water, that data is never going to stop flowing. You can harness that in perpetuity. The goal is to go, if it's 0 to 19%, let's get to 5 on the low end. Let's get to 1, and let's find a way to get to 0.
Eventually 0.
So we're part of that. We're part of that. And what I want to do is bring that data to the surgeons so they can make better decisions. That's our mission in this process.
And I think you bring up an excellent point, which is part of the reason we're doing clinical data as a service, is the way the healthcare data is done, how it's documented, doesn't make it available for the surgeon or the patient to see the data. We put it into these fragmented electronic medical records, and I think of it as data jails. They're in data jails. We have to free up that data, and in doing that, we can start answering those questions where right now the answers are, like you said, we don't know because we don't have good data. What's your hernia recurrence rate? We don't know. What's your leak rate? We don't know. What are the implications in terms of value or the lack of value? We don't know. We need to put financial data with patient outcomes data to measure value, because when we're not measuring it, we can't improve it. And that's one of the biggest challenges in healthcare, is we're not measuring the right things. We're not using data tools appropriately. And I think that's part of what resonates with you and your company.
But we're a startup though, Bruce.
Yeah.
My investors want me to be singularly focused on launching the world's first quantifiable leak detection. We're not data experts.
Right.
And so when you're in a small company, you partner with the leaders, and certainly CareSyntax is the leader in surgical intelligence. So we partnered with you so that we can stay focused on product development. You can guide the data strategy and help us make sure that from a capability technology, we're automating that, we're putting it in there. But we're not, that's not our area of expertise. We have to stay focused. It's a very efficient use of resources to partner with the world leader. We're lucky to be part of the NVIDIA Inception program too. Again, we're tapping into the experts that bring so much value. That makes us better. The Inception program from NVIDIA was mainly focused on, or is part and tailored towards startups to help them accelerate that curve. And that means that we don't have to be experts in that.
Right.
And when we work it as a partnership. I think the other thing you talk about, with data and data jails, I personally believe that when you take a really complicated problem like surgical leaks, it's not going to be one company or one individual that's going to solve a complicated multifactorial problem. And what it's going to take is everyone sharing data and contributing data. And so I personally believe in somewhat of the open architecture of data. Part of that goes back to the mission. So if your mission is to change healthcare and you won't share data that the entire surgical community can benefit from, then you're kind of holding back. Yeah. And so I also recognize we're a startup, and any of the large or small companies need to protect their proprietary data, especially our algorithms and the things that are related to the way we calculate leaks and the way we can identify leaks, so quickly in under 30 seconds. I can protect the proprietary part of my technology. But when we build the real world evidence registry, my vision for that is that members of every major surgical society go, wow. So Qaelon built a registry that I want to use to help treat my patients better. Not because I'm trying to sell my product. I think in the early stages, when we prove it works, it'll be adopted. I hope that the standard of care for leak detection shifts very rapidly from air bubble to Qaelon. Yeah. And with the data, the real world evidence data, we're constantly harvesting from every individual procedure. We will give the quantity and the quality of data to the surgical community that they can make better decisions. That's a mission I'm signing up for.
Yeah, and that's the platform we're building. That's exactly what we need, is transparency of data, the clinical data. You can have protection of your IP. That's not something that we need to measure in terms of the patient outcomes, but we definitely need transparency of that patient outcomes data, and we need to learn from each other. There's so much we can learn from each other.
We're already doing that. We announced a partnership with RevMedica, a startup stapling company. They're using our technology to evaluate their own, to help accelerate their product development. And I think some of that data might eventually get submitted to FDA to support their regulatory clearance. Here is where, when you look at surgical leaks as a multifactorial problem, staplers are used in almost all those procedures, or it's a hand-sewn anastomosis. And we're not going to stop there. We're going to build other technologies, perfusion technologies, vision technologies, where we can take that data, add it to our data, add it to the stapling data, and then all of the things that you already ingest. And, I don't know how you've taken all these disparate data sets, and it's like the Pac-Man munching it all up, and then the robust CQI process. I think maybe the best way to describe this in colorectal surgery, for example, is with our leak detection and the intelligence platform that CareSyntax has. We are building and bringing surgical intelligence at the moment of care.
Exactly.
That's super exciting. It's the real part of real world evidence in real life today, right now.
Yeah. And this is very exciting because, again, the mission and vision is aligned around improving surgical outcomes. And when you do that, you're agnostic to how to get there. And that's really exciting. So what does it look like a year from now, 2 years from now? You get on the market, working with us, working together. It's a very collaborative effort. Yep. You don't have to do the data science. We'll do that. But you do contribute to the science. Is all about measurement and improvement. How we measure things is very important, and your knowledge and your specific knowledge to your technology can help us figure out how to measure things better. So it is a collaborative effort. But what would you say success will be in a year from now, 2 years from now, as we do this together?
Well, certainly, a startup success is based on getting regulatory clearance and getting adoption. And I think adoption happens with credibility. And in a data revolution world, the credibility bar keeps going up. And I was talking to somebody earlier this week about when surgeons asked me, when I was a sales rep with Ethicon, about, hey, I really need to see some data. And this may sound crazy, but I look back on that now, and probably what I should have done in that moment is laugh. Because data, and I'm getting old, 30 years ago with Ethicon, data for all of healthcare and medical device was randomized control trials. Right. And randomized control trials are this sliver of patients over a very narrow period. And I've written a bunch of clinical protocols for devices. It's designed to make your device look good. So we're going to figure out which patient population it works for, which patient population we look like we have, cured the world's ills. But that's not real. No. Because the difficulty is the whole spectrum of patients. In the middle, those are almost the easy ones. Not that surgery is easy for anyone, but the tails of the data, the tails of the clinical outcomes, that's when you can bring the whole average up, not just changing a small fraction. And so I think back in that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like randomized controlled trials, which are needed. They're part of the FDA regulatory process in the right place. But that's not enough.
Well, and it's not even valid. And this took my brain like a decade to figure out. But as I learned the data science, I learned prospective randomized controlled trials are the evidence generation methodology of reductionist science. Reductionist science came out of the time of the Renaissance, and it assumes the world and human beings are static mechanical systems, and we're not. And so when you think about the assumptions required for a prospective randomized controlled trial to be valid, nothing can change. You have to know and control all variables, and whatever's produced has to be generalizable to all patients and all environments, and none of those are true. So it's just invalid based on the assumptions required for it to be valid. And that's a hard thing to process because, like you said, we're still founded on that primarily, but we're in the process of changing. And that change is going to allow us to have a sustainable healthcare system for all of us.
That's great. The question about, where do we want to be in a couple years? We certainly want to have our technology frozen and in the midst of or waiting for that wonderful phone call from FDA, to work towards clearance. Certainly once we have a validated product, we'll go into some trials where we can start gathering clinical data. So if we're a couple years from now, I would say that with the intelligence of your platform, we'll have proof that our technology is very accurate. We've shown it's 100% accurate. We've shown that our test sequence takes around 30 seconds, 28 to 32 seconds. But the world needs to have confidence that we have an effective, accurate device and platform. So I think that's where it starts. And I think that's where, at that point in time, we can prepare for having a footprint, having a legacy of, we were one of those changes in the trajectory of surgical leaks. Now, here's the thing. This is going to sound crazy, but the way to get there is to, I've heard one of the CEOs talk earlier this week, phone a friend. And so we're going to do something unique at Qaelon. We are creating our data advisory board, which will guide the strategy for data for our digital product pipeline. We're actually putting that together before we even build our scientific advisory board. And the reason we're doing that is the data strategy is at the core of our corporate strategy. And there are brilliant people out there. And we want to be able to tap into all of those different minds. And so we're talking to industry leaders first, ones that have expertise in AI, have expertise in data science, have the philosophy of how does data make healthcare better. And then certainly we're going to invite a number of surgeons that are passionate about data, that represent the perspectives of the leading societies. Not speaking on behalf of the societies, but they understand the methodology and what each of those societies is trying to accomplish. And we'll draw that out of them. And that will be just valuable input on what are we doing with our first application? What is it going to do? Certainly, we're going to focus on leak detection, and we're going to progress to predictive models. Right. And eventually, as we integrate other technologies, we will have surgical intelligence, clinical decision-making at the time of surgery. That's when I know that we've done something special.
And that's how we do it together. It's that collaboration, and it's the data science principles where we're continuously learning and applying those insights. And with that, over time, not only do we decrease costs and improve outcomes, we move to that zero leak goal where zero harm is done.
Yes. It's aspirational, and we shouldn't set the target at a low leak rate. We should find a way, and it's going to take some work, and we're willing to work. I'm an ultra trail runner. My long race last fall was 100K, 62 miles. This journey is probably longer than that. And I did that race in 16 and a half hours. This is going to be a harder race, a more challenging race. But the grit and determination that it takes to do that is why we're here. And it goes back to the mission. So why am I doing this? There's this kid named Qaelon, not a kid anymore, he's 23, but there's this kid who I think is a beautiful human being, and I want to make sure he never has to face this in his life.
I don't think there's a better way to end this episode. Thank you very much, Liam.
Thank you.